Cool. So I'm very honoured today to be interviewing Prue Kapua. Prue has had an amazing career. Prue, talk to us about your journey. What are you doing right now?
Right now I'm the National President of the Māori Women's Welfare League.
And do you get to do anything else?
No, not a lot else, not a lot of law practice at the moment, and I still sit on a few other committees and things, but it's pretty full-time.
Pretty full on. So in terms of your very illustrious practice of law, it's been pretty difficult to continue to service clients.
Well, difficult for me personally. I've worked with three wonderful women,
yes,
who are looking after our clients while I'm on this journey.
No, understood. So tell me about your journey. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we live in a society that focuses very much on single axis lines, are you a woman, are you Maori, what's your sexuality? But, you've had a journey which has some complexity in terms of all of these things coming together. So the issue really is, how's that different? How's that different?
How's it different than my journey?
Yeah, your journey.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, what you are and who you are adds to your perspective on anything that you deal with. So whatever you bring to, whether it's decision making, whether it's determining, whether it's assisting people in a particular way, it's about what your own experience is, who you are, where you come from, what your experience is. Like talking about, judges. I mean, they bring their own perspective to talk about some kind of objective assessment of anything is, I think, slightly delusional, because you must always bring how you are, how you were brought up, how you think, to any situation. So I guess in all of those aspects I bring that to the work that I do. Hopefully it's not an issue that people define me by, but it's that they see me as the person. I'm proud of the aspects that I do have, but I acknowledge it affects everything that I do in terms of.
So you've always been an incredibly strong legal practitioner. You're well respected in the profession. Do you feel you've had to work harder because of who you are, your identity?
I think it's a mixed bag, actually, in a way. There's an element where people are looking to tick a box often, and therefore having a Māori practitioner, having a woman practitioner, having a lesbian practitioner, whatever it happens to be, that they see that as being able to tick off. But to the same extent, the degree to which you as a woman or as Māori, whatever, are judged by a majority means that you do have a bit of a barrier there, and I think that makes it a little harder. You do get pigeonholed. People make assumptions about how you're going to think, what you're going to do, how you're going to react to situations. So it does make it hard. I think sometimes people don't take us as seriously. You look at some of the aspects of where our work is distributed or how people deal within our profession with women or with Māori or with people who are different from the majority. And it is a struggle to actually make your mark in there and be accepted, not just for that difference.
So do you think we've now evolved to a time when people realise that the whole phrase diversity needs to be broader than just getting a woman on a board? Generally it's a white woman or an Anglo-Saxon woman, or more Maori on a board, which is really just generally Maori men. Do you think that we've evolved to a time now where people can see actually that a quarter of the population in Auckland are actually coloured women? They're Indigenous, they're Maori, they're Pacifica, they're Asian. That actually things are more complicated. It's not just gender, sometimes it's gender, ethnicity, ability, disability, sexuality.
I think people accept the ethos of diversity. The extent to which they then apply it in terms of what they do is the issue. because, you know, we hear people lauding, as they've done with Māori issues over the years, as they do, and now with, you know, being the ethnic capital, all of those issues. The problem is the decision making. And so having the people making the decisions, we still have the majority white male making decisions that are really important for us all going forward, whether it's within our careers, whether it's within our organisations, whether it's within government, local government. So yes, we acknowledge diversity, and yes, we, you know, talk about it, but we don't actually action it as we should. We don't recognise the value that diversity has. We still have a bit of a clone mentality. You know, we gather around us people on boards who are like us. Law practices are the same. You know, partners in law practices generally, they invite them in, and they invite people that they're comfortable with, that look like them, that act like them. And, you know, that's always been an issue for women coming through law practices. I think medical practices are much more flexible than legal practices, because they all have to work around trying to be, they accept locums, all that stuff. So I think we acknowledge diversity, we don't apply it in terms of decision making.
So one of the reasons for super diverse women is because there are very few super diverse women on boards. And when you ask people, they always say, we looked, but there weren't any that were qualified. So what do you think the impact's going to be of bringing together 100 top women leaders who are super diverse, who are Maori, Pacifica, Asian?
Well, hopefully it allows there to be a support network. You know, a lot of these issues are about isolation. A lot of them are about putting people into situations. Some people flourish in situations where they're the only woman or they're the only Māori or whatever. But for the vast majority, it's a really hard, it's a hard place to go to have a network around where you can learn from each other. You know, we have had people who tend to be a little, well, not as giving as they might be about information to help people into similar situations. And women particularly are a little more prone to hang back, to not be as confident about taking the step that's necessary. I mean, I think Justin Trudeau is quite interesting when you look at his issue about how he brought his cabinet of women, or the women through, was to say that, you know, when women were tapped on the shoulder about, are you interested in standing? How about standing? And they all said, oh, you know, you're talking to me. Oh, well, I've got, you know, to consider this, this and this. Every time they tapped a man on the shoulder, he said, yep, I'm ready to go, ready to go. Right. And, you know, we've got to learn from that actually we need to acknowledge that we are a bit more reluctant. So we need to have supports around us to give us the confidence.
So tell me about your role models as you were working your way through, because I know that there weren't very many and it was lonely. And I often thought, gee, maybe I'm just odd. You know, maybe I'm just rubbish at this. I mean, one of the other great things that Super Diverse Women does do is it really does profile for those coming up that there are a whole lot of women out there like that.
I think for me coming through, making a decision in the first instance to go into law, knowing, you know, the reservations that you have, for me, Dame Shana Elias was a great role model and a person who gave me confidence to make those kind of steps. And that was when she was a barrister, and she too had experienced difficulties in the kind of work that she was offered as a QC and as a barrister, but of course she had made a very strong commitment to the tribunal work, to Māori, to people like Nana Corman-Hinnick, who I was also involved with as well. So having people like that who staunchly stuck to the things that they believed in,
Mm.
and went through the system. For me, that was really good to see. Not to say that there weren't knockbacks on the way through for me, but you know, if you could talk to people who'd gone through that, it made a big difference. So in terms of my legal career, Sian was a great help because she had confidence and she, you know, don't worry about it, you can move through it, and take the step. And I was very wary about going into mainstream law. The other people, I mean, I've been very lucky to have a lot of people through the league, people like Dame Georgina Kirby, who pushed me into the league, forced me probably would be a truer way to say, you have to. When people like Denise Hinari, who who have done some really good stuff, but there's always been that kind of bond. And you know, you look to people like that when you're sort of wondering, you know, can I take these steps and so on. So I mean, I've been very lucky. I've had lots of people who've been there at different times, going through the different challenges that we all face, I guess.
And if you hadn't had that, it would have just been so much harder.
It would have been harder. I mean, I'm lucky. I've got supportive partner. I've got two children. Well, they're not children anymore. Who have always been supportive. You know, because sometimes when you're trying to challenge things, it's a little bit hard. I've been lucky to be able to be in situations where I can challenge things, where I'm not by other people's views. That's been easier for me to do in my own law practice than it was within a firm. And you know, that gives you a sense of freedom to a degree. Whether you make the changes, you know, they're little incremental changes, especially within Maori areas of law. It's a hard area to make the changes. You get little bits. People use them and say, oh, you know, this is a positive thing. And you think, actually, we didn't win at the end of the day. We didn't actually get everything we wanted, but, you know, there's a few nice words in there that make us all feel confident. But, you know, it's hard work, but, you know, it's got to be done. Really.
No, understood. So leading the Maori Women's Welfare League is just such a huge force to be reckoned with. And ensuring that it meets its full potential to help Maori women. Tell me what your priorities are there.
Well, I guess our priorities, we've sat a little bit under the radar for some years. Some of that's, you know, it's a little bit personality driven in a sense. But our priorities now very much about dealing with issues that impact on our women and our whānau, and largely at the moment they're probably more government policies, some of the stuff around care and protection for our children. You know, we're making fundamental changes from where we were with the 89 Act and Prue Te Atatu, and you know, that needs to be challenged. We had a challenge about getting a Māori onto the panel in the first instance. So I just think if we're not vigilant and we don't look out for Māori women and their whānau, I don't know who is. You know, iwi leaders have a kind of interest in this area as well, but they're largely more resource based. You know, it's about land and it's about water and it's about rates, and sometimes our whānau miss out on that, and that was what we were set up to do, and we just have to keep hammering the issues. Do
you think there's a recognition that there is just a separate category? That actually, if you look at the stats, what you find is that white men are at the top, and then white women, and then coloured men, and then coloured women are right at the bottom, and probably right at the bottom of that is Maori women. Do you think there's a recognition that there's a category of Maori women or coloured women that are at the bottom?
there's no reason why there shouldn't be recognition, because the information is all there. I think what happens though is we have this within our within the areas that we operate in, we acknowledge it exists and we do nothing about it. And so, you know, it was interesting to see the Ministry for Women's report to CEDAW, this most recent one, because what did they do? They acknowledged the most poorly performing in all these areas, health, education, etc., Māori women, and what? You know, and so what's the point of that?
Yeah.
And you know, I think that we have to same report, and there's nothing in the report that says, and we're seeking to address it by. No, we just report on the statistics, and I think to a degree that's where we've got to actually start taking some ownership of our own research, our own statistics. That they, you know, what's the point of hammering us with them when there is no outcome that's aimed at improvement?
Apart from confirming that we're at the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the only report that the Ministry for Women did in the last couple of years on Māori women was about violence. And yes, we are disproportionately
but not about
affected.
entrepreneurialism.
No,
and not about business success.
We don't have information about that. And when they report at an international forum, that's what they report on. And they say, you know, for Māori women, this is Indigenous research. Well, I would question that, but they would say the problem is whānau, and the answer is whānau. Well, you know, where does that take us? And that's the only government-oriented research that was done on Māori women.
So that's important, because it does show you that definitions matter. Because what they're doing is they're reinforcing the stereotype by what they're measuring.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
They're not measuring the increased education, the increased fluency in Te Reo Maori.
No.
I mean, even looking at the Kohanga movement or something like that.
And if you look at the areas where they report on health, it's all in the deficit. Even the things where we've improved, where we do have an increased life expectancy and certain illnesses that we don't, you know, that we actually, by virtue of diet or genetics or whatever it happens, we don't, you know, the positive aspects. There's nothing like that. All we get is the deficit reporting.
So hopefully that's something Super Diverse Women can do. We can start to redefine the whole way we look at the debate, and how we're speaking about it. And most importantly, when you look at the Maori women involved in Super Diverse Women, how can you say the only thing we can measure here is domestic violence?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's absolutely right.
So of course the league is right around New Zealand, but you know, you've been an Aucklander.
I was born up in Rotorua, grew up in Rotorua, and came here to university many years ago, and have been here pretty much ever since. Had a little time overseas.
So of course we now know, because of this big campaign, that Tamaki Makaurau means the place desired by many. So tell me about why you find this place desirable. You know, about this place as a cultural context for you to operate and to put your mark on the world.
I think probably for me, you know, there's a call about whether you go home or whether you stay in a place where going home is always very difficult as a Māori lawyer. It is fraught with all sorts of issues. But for me, Tamaki has that base that's very strong in terms of Māori. And you know, we have a large Māori population, but we also have that diversity around the Pacific community. A lot of the work that I've done has been in terms of the Pacific community as well. So that's I mean, it characterises Auckland, in my view, that base and the diversity that exists in terms of the population. I mean, I began my legal career working in race relations, and that was based here. in Tāmaki because that was where the issues were. That was where people came to, you know, and in the earlier days of that, people used to advertise that, you know, Maori need not apply for houses and so on. So at that particular time, it was very, people were very aware of the areas where particular communities lived. And probably, it might be a little unfair, but because I don't know that much about some of the other areas, but I think it was more pronounced in Auckland, and that's always been a part of both my working and my personal life. So I think that's why you kind of stay and you're familiar with it and you know it.
But Auckland's really quite unique now.
It is very unique. And unlike, I mean, I spend a lot of time now in Wellington, and you know from
yes, I do.
Being completely different, absolutely different environment, almost a different sort of kind of working climate, a different perspective of people. And I suppose I'm working more in the central area, but that whole kind of public service difference that you don't have in Auckland. It's they are, for me, significantly different places.
So I'm amazed by how similar our paths are, because you came into the law through discrimination law, and so did I, actually. And I think that's really the similarities that bring us together. This race gender mix, this intersectionality, really has had quite a significant impact on the whole way we've journeyed in our experiences.
Absolutely. And being able to, I mean, at the end of the day, not at the end of my career, hopefully I'm not quite there yet, but at the end of the day, it's the ability to be able to get through that and be able to still have the passion to work in the areas that interested you in the beginning. You know, I think the things that drove me into law about the issues, I can still do it, but I have to do it by moulding the kind of practice that doesn't fit with what people would see as a standard way that people practice law and so on. You have to kind of step outside of that box, but if you can actually get through it and be able to survive it and maintain a kind of practice that still makes you want to get up every day and practice law. I don't think I could have done that in staying in some of the firms that I was in then, because their approach would have changed. You know,
I feel very encouraged by what you said, because sometimes it's hard. You look at other people's careers and they follow a formula and they seem to be very happy with that, and they get to the top and you just look at your own career.
Oh, absolutely. And it there are lots of things I think in the careers that are about timing, but also about the fact, and there are opportunities that present themselves at different times, but sometimes they come with far too many fish hooks than you can cope with if you want to maintain your own integrity, really. And I guess that is that. Sometimes you look at, sometimes you think, I would just like to sit here and know that I work from 9 till 5, and I don't have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and worry about things. But at the end of the day, I don't know how happy you'd be doing that. And I've been lucky because with the people I've worked with in my own practice, that's allowed me to be able to do the things that I feel passionate about, like with the league. You couldn't do that if you were working in other situations.
But it's just, I'm so grateful that you're giving some time to this, because I think we can only be stronger together.
Oh, absolutely.
And most importantly, I just want people to recognise that there's a whole group of people who have just a really different experience from just the gender experience. Because actually, when you look at the intersectionality between gender and race, I often find the ethnicity issue is much, much bigger than the gender issue.
Yeah. I think a gender issue is a little more acceptable you know, within kind of society. People have got used to that, and they've got used to talking about that and identifying that. The ethnicity, race, Indigenous, you know, they're all issues that people do struggle. They find that a lot harder to deal with.
As post-Trump America is fine. So
Indeed,
I think we'll end on that note because we don't have another 3 hours. Thank you very much.